Why are you proud to be poor? Not literally poor. I'm talking about the kind of poor where you work 50 hours a week and still can't afford to miss a paycheck. Where you've got a closet full of branded clothes and a bank account full of nothing. Where you'll stand in line for 6 hours to buy shoes that cost $300, but you won't spend 20 minutes learning how your money actually works. That kind of poor. The kind where you wear your poverty like a badge of honor because at least you're wearing the right logo when you do it. There's a religion being practiced in every mall, on every street corner, in every pocket where a phone glows with curated images of the life you're supposed to want. And you're not just a follower. You're a missionary. You evangelize for brands that don't know your name, that would step over your body to reach the next customer, that have turned your identity into a revenue stream and your self-worth into a quarterly earnings report. And the beautiful part, the part that makes this whole con so perfect, is that you think you chose this. You think this is freedom. This is the story of how brands became gods. How corporations learned to hack the human need for belonging and turned it into the most profitable scam in history. And how a century of psychological warfare has convinced you that the path to individuality runs straight through conformity, that rebellion means buying the right products, and that the ultimate expression of self is choosing which billionaire gets to define who you are. Let me paint you a picture. It's a Tuesday morning in any city in the world. A teenager wakes up, reaches for their phone, and the first thing they see is an image of someone wearing shoes they don't own. Not just any shoes. The shoes. The ones that dropped last week. The ones that sold out in 7 minutes. The ones that are being resold for twice the price because scarcity drives desire, and desire drives price, and price drives status. And status is the only currency that matters when you've been taught that your worth is determined by what you own. This kid, let's call him Marcus, he's going to spend the next 8 hours in school thinking about those shoes. Not the test he has 4th period. Not the college applications he should be working on. The shoes, because somewhere along the way, without anyone explicitly teaching him this, Marcus learned that identity is something you purchase, that belonging is something you buy, that the fastest way to be seen is to wear the right uniform, and he's not stupid, he's not shallow, he's just doing what every human being has done since we lived in caves. He's trying to signal to his tribe that he belongs. The only difference is that now the tribe is a customer database, and the signal is a $300 product made in a factory for $12 by someone who will never be able to afford to buy it. But here's where it gets dark. Marcus knows he can't afford these shoes. His mom is working 2 jobs. His dad sends money when he can. There's no extra $300 lying around for footwear. So Marcus has options. He can save for months, denying himself everything else, turning these shoes into a shrine of delayed gratification. He can borrow the money from friends, creating a web of debt that will strain relationships and teach him that financial obligation is just part of life. He can buy them on credit, stepping onto the treadmill of interest payments and minimum balances that will follow him for years. Or he can do what thousands of kids his age do every day. He can steal them. He can rob someone who already has them. He can commit violence in service of a brand that doesn't know he exists. And here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. The brand doesn't care which option he chooses. The brand has already won. Because whether Marcus saves, borrows, finances, or steals, the message is the same. These shoes matter. This brand matters. Your worth is tied to ownership. And that message, that core belief, is worth more than the profit on a single pair of shoes. It's worth a lifetime of purchases, of status anxiety, of perpetual dissatisfaction with what you have and endless hunger for what you don't. This didn't happen by accident. This wasn't the natural evolution of commerce. This was designed, engineered, weaponized. And to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the moment when brands stopped selling products and started selling identity. Back to the exact point in history when someone figured out that the real money wasn't in meeting needs, but in manufacturing insecurity and selling the cure. Germany, 1920. A man named Hans Domislav is working as an advertising consultant. The country is in ruins. Hyperinflation is destroying the economy. People are burning money for heat because it's cheaper than buying firewood. And in this chaos, Domislav sees an opportunity. He publishes a book called The Winning of Public Trust. In it, he lays out a radical idea. Brands, he argues, should function like religious movements. They should have symbols, rituals, mythology. They should create believers, not just customers. They should own not just shelf space, but mind space. They should become part of people's identity. This was the birth of modern brand management. Not just advertising, not just marketing, but the systematic creation of loyalty that transcends rational decision-making. Domislav understood something that most people in his era didn't. People don't buy products. They buy the story they tell themselves about who they are. And if you can control that story, if you can make your brand an essential part of someone's self-concept, then price becomes irrelevant. Quality becomes irrelevant. The actual utility of the product becomes irrelevant. All that matters is what ownership signals about the owner. Now let's jump across the ocean. United States, 1955. Post-war prosperity is booming. People have money. Factories that made tanks and planes are now making cars and appliances. And a sociologist named David Reisman publishes a book called The Lonely Crowd. In it, he describes a fundamental shift in American character. People are moving from being inner-directed, guided by values instilled early in life, to being other-directed, constantly looking to peers for cues about how to behave, what to want, who to be. The locus of identity is moving from internal to external, from self to group. And the advertising industry is watching. They're reading this research. They're funding more of it, because what Reisman is describing is the perfect consumer, someone who doesn't know who they are until they check what everyone else is doing, someone whose sense of self is so fragile, so dependent on external validation that it can be shaped and reshaped with the right messaging. Someone who will buy not because they need, but because they need to be seen buying. This is when advertising shifts from features and benefits to lifestyle and aspiration. Volkswagen doesn't sell you a car. They sell you membership in the club of people who are smart enough to think small. Marlboro doesn't sell you cigarettes. They sell you rugged individualism and masculine independence, which is hilarious because you're buying mass-produced products from a corporation, but the irony is part of the appeal. You get to feel like a rebel while doing exactly what millions of other people are doing. You get to feel unique while being perfectly, profitably predictable. But the real breakthrough, the thing that turned brand loyalty from a marketing tactic into a cultural religion, happened in the 1980s. This is when brands figured out that the most valuable thing they could sell wasn't a product at all. It was scarcity, artificial scarcity, the deliberate withholding of supply to manufacture demand, the creation of hype. Nike was the pioneer here. They started limiting production runs, making shoes that were only available in certain stores, creating drops where products would sell out in minutes. And what they discovered was that scarcity didn't just drive sales. It created obsession. It turned customers into collectors. It made buying into a competitive sport. And most importantly, it created a secondary market where their products traded like stocks, where value could multiply exponentially, where shoes stopped being shoes and became investments, status symbols, religious artifacts. This is when we see the birth of sneaker culture. And I want to be clear about what sneaker culture actually is. It's not about athletic performance. Michael Jordan could have worn anything and still dominated the court. It's not about comfort or durability. These shoes often sit in boxes, never worn, preserved like museum pieces. It's about belonging to a club, about having access, about being in the know, about the rush of copping something rare, about the social capital that comes from owning something other people want. It's about identity outsourced to a corporation, and once Nike proved the model worked, everyone copied it. Supreme, a skate shop in New York, turned it into an art form. They'd release a brick with their logo on it and people would line up to buy it. Not because they needed a brick, because owning that brick proved you were part of the in-group, because scarcity creates value and value creates status, and status is what you're really buying. The brick is just the delivery mechanism. Apple did the same thing with technology. They created the mystique of the drop, the keynote presentation as religious service, the product launch as cultural event, the overnight line as pilgrimage. And they understood that the product itself almost didn't matter. What mattered was being the kind of person who had it first. What mattered was the unboxing, the display, the signal to everyone around you that you're not just a consumer, you're a believer. And here's where it gets really sinister. These brands started hiring psychologists, neuroscientists, behavioral economists. They started studying addiction. They started mapping the same neural pathways that light up with gambling, with drugs, with any compulsive behavior. And they found that the anticipation of a product, the hunt for it, the fear of missing out, these activate the same reward systems as chemical substances. Your brain on hype is literally experiencing a version of addiction, and the brands know this. They optimize for it. They engineer it into every aspect of their business model. They create artificial scarcity through limited releases. They create urgency through flash sales and countdowns. They create social proof through influencer marketing and celebrity endorsements. They create FOMO through social media, where every feed is a constant reminder of what you don't have, who you're not, where you're failing to keep up. And they create the illusion of community, of tribe, of belonging, while actually fostering competition, comparison, and isolation. Because here's the secret they don't want you to understand. Brand communities aren't communities. They're customer segmentation strategies. They're not bringing people together. They're sorting people into demographic buckets for more efficient targeting. When you go to a sneaker convention or a Supreme drop or an Apple store on launch day, you're not experiencing solidarity. You're experiencing manufactured tribalism designed to separate you from your money while making you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. Think about the language these brands use. Believer, loyalist, true fan, insider, member. These aren't commercial terms. They're religious terms, cult terms. And that's not an accident. These brands studied how cults work, how religions work, how movements work, and they applied those principles to selling shoes and phones and t-shirts and hoodies. They create origin stories in mythology. Nike has Michael Jordan. Apple has Steve Jobs. Supreme has James Jebbia and the skate scene. These aren't just company histories. They're sacred texts. They're the stories that give meaning to your purchases. They transform buying into participation in something larger. They make consumption feel like purpose. They create rituals, the sneaker drop, the product launch, the unboxing video, the Instagram post. These aren't just transactions, they're ceremonies. They're the ways you prove your faith. They're how you perform your identity for the congregation of followers and strangers who validate your choices with likes and comments and shares. They create symbols, the swoosh, the bitten apple, the box logo. These marks are more recognizable than most religious symbols. They're more universal than flags. They're the icons you wear on your body to signal your allegiance. They're the brands you literally brand yourself with, tattooing corporate logos onto your skin like they're family crests or tribal markings. And they create excommunication. If you wear fake Jordans, if you use an Android phone in the Apple ecosystem, if you show up to the streetwear forum in mall brands, you're not just making a different choice. You're committing heresy. You're revealing yourself as an outsider. You're subject to ridicule, exclusion, contempt. Because brand cults, like all cults, maintain cohesion through the threat of exile, through the fear that if you don't keep up, if you don't buy in, you'll be cast out, left behind, alone. The genius of this system is that it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like choice. It feels like self-expression. You're not being controlled by corporations. You're making decisions about what you like, what speaks to you, what represents who you are, except those decisions are being made within a framework that was designed to constrain your choices while giving you the illusion of freedom. It's like being allowed to choose between Coke and Pepsi and thinking that's democracy. The brands have studied you down to the neurochemical level. They know that social exclusion activates the same brain regions as physical pain. They know that belonging is a fundamental human need, right up there with food and shelter. They know that identity formation, especially in adolescence and young adulthood, is a vulnerable process desperately seeking external validation. And they've built a machine that exploits every single one of these vulnerabilities while convincing you that you're the one in control. Let me tell you what this costs, and I don't mean the price tag on the product. I mean the real cost, the opportunity cost, the life cost. Every dollar you spend on brand worship is a dollar you're not investing, not saving, not using to build actual wealth. And before you say it's just shoes or just clothes or just phones, let me do the math for you. The average sneakerhead spends somewhere between $1,000 to $5,000 a year on shoes. Let's be conservative and say $1,500. If you started at age 15 and did this until you were 30, that's 15 years. That's $22,500. If you'd invested that money instead, at a modest 7% annual return, you'd have almost $40,000. By the time you're 50, that same money would be worth over $200,000. You'd be trading a closet full of depreciating assets for a retirement fund. But it's not just the money. It's the time. The hours spent in lines. The hours scrolling release calendars. The hours watching YouTube videos about products you can't afford. The hours refreshing websites trying to cop limited drops. The hours comparing yourself to people who have more, better, rarer things than you. The hours feeling inadequate because you can't keep up. This is your life. These are your hours. And you're spending them in service of brands that see you as a data point. And it's the mental space, the anxiety about missing drops, the stress about affording the next release, the fear that your collection is becoming outdated, the constant comparison, the nagging sense that no matter what you have, it's not enough. This is what living in a brand cult does to your psychology. It keeps you in a permanent state of lack, of hunger, of never quite arriving. Because if you ever felt satisfied, if you ever felt complete, you'd stop buying, and the system can't allow that. The system needs you anxious. It needs you insecure. It needs you constantly measuring yourself against impossible standards and coming up short. It needs you to believe that the solution to feeling bad about not having enough is to buy more. It needs you on the hedonic treadmill, running faster and faster to stay in the same place, never realizing that the treadmill itself is the problem. So what do? How do you break free from a system that's been engineered to exploit your deepest psychological needs? How do you step out of a cult when the cult has convinced you that exile means death, that not belonging means not existing, that your identity is inseparable from your consumption? First, you have to see it. You have to recognize that what you're experiencing isn't natural. It's not just how things are. It's how things were designed to be. By specific people, for specific reasons, using specific techniques. When you feel that compulsion to buy, that fear of missing out, that anxiety about not having the right things, you're not experiencing your authentic desires. You're experiencing the output of a machine that's been optimized to generate exactly those feelings. Second, you have to understand what you're actually buying. You're not buying shoes. You're buying the hope that these shoes will make you the person you wish you were. You're not buying clothes. You're buying the fantasy that these clothes will grant you access to a life you don't have. You're not buying phones. You're buying the promise that this device will connect you to meaning, purpose, belonging, and that promise is always a lie. Because those things don't come from products. They never have. They never will. Third, you have to find real identity. Not purchased identity. Not borrowed identity. Not identity that exists only in the eyes of others who are just as lost as you are. But identity that comes from knowing who you are independent of what you own. Identity that comes from skills you've developed, values you've chosen, relationships you've built, contributions you've made. Identity that can't be bought or sold because it's not for sale. This means doing the hard work of figuring out what you actually care about, not what you've been told to care about, not what gets likes on social media, but what matters to you when nobody's watching. What brings you satisfaction that doesn't require an audience. What makes you feel alive in a way that has nothing to do with status or recognition or validation from strangers. Fourth, you have to reject the game. You have to opt out. And opting out doesn't mean becoming a hermit or wearing burlap sacks. It means making conscious decisions about what you buy and why. It means asking yourself before every purchase whether you're buying a thing or buying a feeling. Whether you're solving a problem or feeding an addiction, whether you're expressing yourself or performing for others. It means buying things that serve you instead of things you serve. It means choosing quality over quantity, durability over hype, function over fashion. It means walking past the limited drop, ignoring the countdown timer, unfollowing the influencers who make you feel less than. It means building a life where your worth isn't tied to your wardrobe, where your confidence doesn't depend on recognition, where your sense of self is strong enough to withstand the absence of external validation. And fifth, you have to build something real. Because here's what the brand cults are actually replacing. They're replacing community with customer bases. They're replacing purpose with consumption. They're replacing craft with collecting. They're replacing creation with curation. And you have to build those things back. You have to find actual communities based on shared values, not shared purchases. You have to discover actual purpose that comes from making things, helping people, solving problems, not from acquiring things. You have to develop actual skills that give you identity through competence, not through consumption. This is harder than buying shoes. This takes longer than standing in line. This doesn't come with unboxing videos or Instagram moments, but it's real. It lasts. It's yours. And nobody can take it from you when the next trend drops and your collection becomes worthless. The brand cults are counting on you staying asleep. They're counting on you staying hungry. They're counting on you believing that the hole you feel inside can be filled with products. They're counting on you being so desperate for belonging that you'll pay any price, sacrifice any opportunity, ignore any alternative. Don't give them what they want. The swoosh on your chest isn't your identity. It's theirs. The logo on your phone isn't your personality. It's their brand. The hype you're chasing isn't your dream. It's their quarterly earnings target. And the community you think you're part of isn't a tribe. It's a market segment. You were born with everything you need to be whole. You don't need to buy it. You don't need to earn it through purchases. You don't need to prove it with products. The system wants you to forget this. The brands profit from your amnesia. But the truth remains, whether you remember it or not. You are not what you own. You are not what you wear. You are not defined by your ability to access limited releases or afford premium products. You are the sum of your choices, your relationships, your skills, your values, your contributions to the world around you, and none of that fits in a shopping bag. The cult is strong, the programming is deep, the pressure is real, but so is your ability to wake up, to see through it, to choose differently, to build a life that belongs to you instead of giving your life to brands that don't care if you exist beyond your ability to generate revenue. That's the secret they don't want you to know. You're already enough. You always were. The poverty they've sold you isn't economic. It's spiritual. It's the poverty of believing you're incomplete, of believing you need external things to validate internal worth, of believing that identity is something you purchase instead of something you create. Break the spell. Leave the cult. Reclaim your life. Not someday. Now. Before you've spent another dollar, another hour, another piece of yourself on brands that will never love you back.